Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's webinar. It's a pleasure to have all of you connecting for our webinar on the 10 digital responsibilities in sport. My name is Diego Valdez. I am the director at the Sports Business Institute Barcelona. And tonight I'm joined by Stephen Bourke, who is the program director for managing digital transformation in sport, an online certificate program that we will be running in September, and which we'll talk a little bit more about in just a moment. I will shortly introduce our guest tonight, Stephen, in just a moment. Before that, however, I just want to run through a few housekeeping details, and then we're going to turn it over and begin the webinar tonight. So as I said, my name is Diego Valdez. I'm the director at the Sports Business Institute Barcelona, and for those of you that may not be familiar with our organization, we specialize in providing training for those that are looking to advance, develop their career in the business side of sport, and particularly the football industry. Now, I always like to make sure when we have these live webinars that the sound is coming through okay. And we also like to see where people are connecting from. So what I'd like to do is on the chat icon that you should see there on your screens, if you can just type in OK, and also the city or the country where you're connecting from, because we are always keen to find out, where our audience is coming from. So type in OK or yes, and also the city or the country where you're connecting from, because we'd love to hear where our audience is coming from tonight. So, okay, I see we have some people from Zurich, we have Sebastiano, we have Anthony from Belgium, Paulo from Jakarta in Indonesia. Excellent. So it looks like the sound is coming through. Okay. Lisbon, Bruno, welcome. Shanaz from Indonesia. Carlos from Spain. Amadou from Conarchy. Right. Wow. So from all continents, all over the world. Denmark. I also see London. Andrew. Edmundo from Angola. Hello, Edmundo. Welcome. We have someone from Texas. Myostis. Elizabeth from Michigan. Wow. So, all right. Nice to see that we have a global audience connecting tonight. The webinar should be lasting approximately 60 minutes. And at the end, we're going to have a period of question and answers so that you can have an opportunity to engage with Stephen as we move forward. Now, let me begin and introduce the hashtag for tonight. So we would like you to keep the conversation alive during this webinar and beyond. We will be monitoring the hashtag on Twitter. So the hashtag is SBIDigi. So feel free to use that, and we're going to have our team monitoring the conversation as we move forward with the webinar. As I said, our speaker tonight is Stephen. Stephen is a digital analyst, digital strategist. He's really an expert in the industry, and we're very proud to have him as our course leader and director for managing digital transformation in sports. And the webinar tonight is going to be structured in the following manner. So in just a moment, I'm going to turn it over to Stephen, where he's going to talk about the 10 digital responsibilities in sport, which essentially is a snapshot of the areas that have had the most impact in the business of sport. And Stephen will, go much more in depth into that in just a moment. After Stephen's presentation, we're going to provide you a short overview on managing digital transformation in sport, which, as I mentioned, is the online certificate program that will be starting in September. And it's meant for those that are looking to manage, lead change within their organization and navigate through the digital disruption in the industry. And like I said, at the end, we're going to have a Q&A session. So without any further delay, I'm going to turn it over to Stephen. Stephen, welcome. The floor is yours.
Okay, thanks. With people dialing in from all over the world, I feel like I should firstly apologise for an Australian accent, and I'll try and speak a little slower so that you can understand me as well. But firstly, thanks very much for tuning in. Getting people's attention these days is one of the biggest challenges, and I really appreciate your time and look to make the most of it. So to give you some insight into where this model of the 10 digital age responsibilities came from, I spent about 3 years or so researching digital transformation or the impact of digital on the economy and in the sports industry in particular, because that's where I come from. And I did that because I felt, I live in Qatar in the Middle East, I felt that I'd become disconnected with the pace of change on the outside. And so I started studying it, and it built up into more of a hobby and then a passion, and then into this certificate course. So one of the things that I got my head around is, what's really changed for the organization over time. We know there's specific roles coming into the organization, but what are the real drivers of change within the organization? And before I go into them, and you can see them here, like the reason that we are doing this is because the external environment has changed so much. It's changed because of us as people, us as consumers, and what we can now do with our time. Now that we have a supercomputer basically in our hip pocket, we can be doing so many different things. And so that's a real competitive challenge for us as sports organizations. And the other thing that's really changed is that sport no longer competes with itself. So football's not competing with any other code to try and get participants in necessarily. We're actually competing with anything else that people can be doing. So social media, messaging friends, video on demand, things like Netflix, gaming and esports are all taking time away from us as fans, and also the next generation of fans who don't necessarily follow what their parents and their siblings used to do, which is the traditional rite of passage into fandom. Now people are getting their stimulus from YouTube and their friends. They're following global stars differently than rather than teams and so on. So with all of this kind of change, the organizations themselves have to adapt to that, and it's often the organization and government regulators that are the last ones to change. So as we go through these 10 different areas that I've identified, consider your own organization in their context, and maybe mark down against each of them, like 1, 2, 3, one being you're very early in that maturing stage, or in the second one you're developing, or third you are maturing. And then later on you can look at that and critically assess, okay, our organization is moving well in these areas, but we're behind in these. And then you can have those internal conversations about what could be the priority areas to address in your organization. The other thing that I wanted to do with this presentation is look at it in terms of the World Cup, because let's face it, we all love football, and it was such a fantastic experience. And I'm a sports business nerd as well as a sports fanatic. So it's great to go back in time and look at that event from the business side of things, in terms of particularly what FIFA has shared about the organization, what they shared about their aspirations, and how they were able to deliver on them as well. So before I turn to them, this slide's got a lot of content on it, but you don't have to worry about that. You can go over to the SBI website and pull it down. It's on a blog that I did recently. But the point that I wanted to make is that as fans, we're also connected consumers. It doesn't matter what age we are, we're a connected consumer. So sometimes we go to our favorite team and we want to consume there, and maybe we have different expectations there because we're a lifelong advocate of theirs, or at other times we're a different brand consumer. But there's certain things that are happening in the whole of society that impact on the organization, and a couple of these things are telling coming out of World Cup 2018, and that is that streaming, over the top content is becoming, rapidly becoming much more accessible and much more utilized. In fact, by the end of the group stage, there had been more streaming sessions than there had been in 2014, and then you factor in, the exponential growth leading into the finals as well. And in the US, they found that 50% of those streamings were on mobile, which I found was surprising as well. I thought a lot of it would have been people pinging it to their TV, their smart TV, which a lot were. Part of the other 50% were, and the other component, we're looking at it on desktop. But nevertheless, streaming really is becoming a big thing, and particularly in sport, with the big social media platforms now being able to use their own distribution networks, that's really set up to be a perfect storm in that area. So getting on to the first of the digital age responsibilities, and it all starts with strategy. While I've put that the responsibility is digital strategist, it's actually, I don't think that there's such a thing necessarily as digital strategy. You might have digital in the marketing strategy, but you wouldn't have a digital marketing strategy. You wouldn't have a digital strategy in the IT department, although you could have a technology strategy and roadmap. But what you do need to have at the enterprise level is a strategy for the digital age. And what that means is, because organizations can now move closer to our markets and closer to individuals than ever before, we have the opportunity to redefine what the organization is to our fans in this digital age. One of the teams that I like to reference the most is AS Roma, just because they have such a clear and compelling statement about who they are, and that is they want to be the most fan-connected team in the world. So everything that they do takes them back to that North Star of wanting to be the most fan-connected team in the world. And actually, as a consequence of the first course that we ran at the start of the year, where AS Roma heard that I was profiling them, as one of the leading teams, that they've come along and pledged their support to be involved as well in future courses, so we can look forward to learning even more about AS Roma. The other reason, apart from the customer experience or fan engagement for sport, where you might pursue a digital strategy, is for operational efficiency. And we can see that in venues, for example, which will come up with their own statement. Levi's Stadium, the home of the San Francisco 49ers, is a great example, where they want to provide the most compelling 49ers experience using technology as the enabler of that. FIFA, with their greater transparency these days, published FIFA 2.0, which you can find, and it's a great resource document for where they're going as well. But their strategy map looks like this, and you can see that enhancing the fan experience is front and center in their vision. And also within their vision statement, the last few words I think are most important when we talk about fan engagement, and that is bringing the game to all. So they really want to go out and reach and influence people under the umbrella of their ownership of the great game that is football. The other thing that FIFA did in the lead up to World Cup 2018 was to declare that 2018 was going to be FIFA's year of digital revolution. And revolution is an interesting choice of words, because it's really saying that we're going to throw out everything that we thought we knew from before, and we're going to move forward in ways that interact and engage with our fans. And that was a statement made by FIFA president, and I think they really delivered on that at the World Cup. The next one, the digital transformation is enabled by data. Because the ironic thing in the digital age is that technology actually enables us to move closer to people, not further away from them. So we need to harness that ability. And within technology, data through the transactions is what remains. And that data can make fans become known to us as individuals, and that can mean that we can predict their behaviours. It also means that we can efficiently optimise resources, where we can be more targeted with membership offerings, knowing whether they're an individual, a family, a couple, what stage of life these people in, the sort of things that they like to do. We can provide upgrades because we know where they are in the stadia. We can make sure they don't leave their empty cart if they're online on our e-commerce site. All of these things are made possible by data, and that's really the way that revenues are getting unlocked in the digital age. So there's a saying that goes that data is the new oil and analytics is its refinery. So we know that we're really moving into an era where data is critically important as a resource. the thing that we're finding is that even in the most mature of organizations, there's a lot of work to be done still on becoming a digital master. And I'll explain that in a couple of bullet points here. So the things that an organization really needs to do with data is connect a data strategy to the organization objectives. So that way, you know why data is needed. And if we take it back to the AS Roma case, we know that they're relentlessly pursuing getting closer to their fans. So they can always ask, does this data take us closer to the fans? If it does, great, let's keep mining that. If not, then we know it's not of benefit to us, so let's not put our resource there. And it also then informs what data and where that data is, and therefore what investments need to be made in the refinery process. The other areas which are really where organizations are breaking down is in the top management sponsorship and leadership of digital initiatives. It's something that typically leaders aren't investing the time in, probably because they're too busy with other things. They defer it to others. But the point of that is it's not creating the culture that is needed to get the buy-in and also to create a data-enabled decision-making environment where the people who are the analysts feel that their work matters and that they work on the most important projects. They're getting developed up. Their reports are getting up to the C-suite and so on. So one of the things that was really notable turning to World Cup is that they introduced a really powerful app, and for sure they did it to enhance the fan experience. As Orlando Magic like to say, that the smartphone is a remote control to the event, and I think that's a really clever way to look at it. But secondly, they own the data from app usage. They don't own the data when people are interacting on Facebook or Twitter or any of those others. For sure, they would have had partnerships because of their size with those organizations, but still, they're not getting the data directly. And so now with the app, they're getting so much more exposure from people logging in, from the way that people are using it, from the countries that they're using it from, and so on, that even after the event, they'll go back and look at all of the learnings from out of that data and come back with an even more tailored experience in the next World Cup. So that's one way they're using their data refining responsibility. Nextly is employer of choice. One of the biggest barriers to becoming really proficient in the digital era is having the right talent. And so that means that organizations are now in competition for the latest digital skills, whether they be in marketing, in technology, in analytics, but even more so, I think, in having managers and leaders who are really well equipped to look after the organization's future. So once again, there needs to be a culture that attracts people into the organization. And one of the ways that people can see whether the organization is an employer of choice or not, because we're in such a transparent era, is to look at the profile, look at the content that organization is putting out on all of the digital channels, because that really takes us into the heart and soul of what the organization is, even if we're not really conscious about it. And one of the social channels that I think is the most important is LinkedIn. And we can see with FIFA, during the World Cup, they deliberately took pieces of content that they thought reflected well with their organizational culture and put that onto their LinkedIn page. Here you can see their rival hug campaign, where they were looking to bring fans of competing nations together, which is really a good human interest story, and shows that they're interested in diversity, they're interested in celebration, they're interested in individuals and so on. So they've put that kind of content there because that reflects their culture. Another couple of organizations, if you're interested in looking how they how they position themselves well as employers of choice, are the NBA and UEFA. Experience provider. Now this one is really is operationalizing the strategy. We're fortunate in sport, and we have our own term for it called fan engagement. For every other industry, it's just customer experience, and then they all try and provide a customer experience. But we have fans, and they want to be engaged. So delivering on that engagement promise and having a really defined purpose for it, as AS Roma do, and others do as well, because one of the things with sport is, and to see it with the great strategies, is that they link it to an emotional outcome, and they link it to having football or following the team as something that adds value to that person's life. And so putting a mission statement around that, we want our fans to be the happiest fans, could create a compelling purpose towards that, for example. So because modern fans now place themselves in the middle of the experience, you know, we want to share, we want to be able to tailor when we order something, we want to know what the easiest way to navigate to our seat is, if we're offered an upgrade to another seat, or we want to order concessions or merchandise or whatever. We want to be in control of that. You know, Uber has really forced us to be like that, to think that we can be like that. But what that means is that the business needs to also shift as well in how it delivers on this experience. And that means that we need to be more focused around fans. There needs to be shared metrics. And so we can imagine that, like in most cases, there isn't one area of the organization that is responsible for fan satisfaction, which is quite interesting, that we're still in this really like organizational mode of eras gone by, where each of the departments is told to be very good at its specific function, but we need to break that down and start moving into a more agile way of thinking about the fan and having a 360-degree view of them as a single entity as well, which is where the investments come in as well. Another interesting point about the experience is that Microsoft found that 71% of how a brand performs is based on the quality of its content. So now we really are content providers, not just because we're trying to fill that gap between the 90 minutes on a Saturday afternoon, but because that's how people end up feeling about us as an organization. You know, I'm sure if you look at AS Roma's social accounts, you know, they're very funny, they're very clever, they're really innovative. I'm sure the people who follow AS Roma feel proud that that's the sort of content that their organization is putting out, and that's kind of aspirational for others as well. FIFA declared that Russia 28 was their most engaging FIFA World Cup ever, which is, you know, on the surface an easy claim to make, because you would expect that in 4 years' time, the next one will be the most engaging as well, because we keep getting better and better at these kind of things. But the things that they put out and they promoted throughout the event are interesting. You know, they said that they had 7.5 billion engagements across all FIFA digital platforms, and they had over 580 million interactions on all social media platforms. So they were really measuring not just what they pushed out there, but they were measuring the interaction and the engagement, because for them, that's how they were going to define success. And that's how all the leading sports organizations also defined their digital success. The next one is community manager. And it's interesting that before digital, what organizations did was they really just promoted the next event. It was a one-way broadcast, but now it's about forming relationships. And people choose to follow the social or digital accounts of any of their favorite teams for the value that team's account is going to bring to their life. So that brings with it a responsibility to not just be corporate, but to be the kind of organization that person wanted when they signed up. So that means being very humanizing, and it's one of those things that really needs to be understood by leadership to empower the people who are in the social and digital content areas to be able to do those kinds of things. The sort of things that the content management mean are that you study what works best and understand why that works best, and then innovate off of that. You look at social listening and see the type of conversations that are being had. So you can either join that conversation or prepare something else about that. You know, if Mbappe is becoming a star throughout the event, then do a story about him. You know, keep understanding and keep being in touch with them as a community, and participate in the conversations and even start them. And FIFA were very good at that in the way that they held surveys and competitions and so on. And another thing is that one of the things that there's no point being on social media if you don't then answer the people who are there talking to you. It's one of the biggest turn-offs of anyone, doesn't matter if they're following a team or following a brand, not to be listened to and not to be responded to on social media really turns people away. One of the real success tweets of FIFA 2018, and it really highlighted the community management focus that FIFA brought to the event, was their FIFA Stadium DJ competition. And they launched this with a tweet, and it became their most tweeted post ever, like getting more than 1.5 million retweets, which is really viral. But the interesting thing about this is it's FIFA's most popular tweet that has nothing to do with football. It has to do with the experience leading up to it. And that's one of the things that community management is unlocking, and that is that the best brands are now actually becoming lifestyle brands. So people are turning to them for inspiration, for fun, for interactions, far more than just the match. You know, the game becomes a platform for all manner of other things. And also the tone that the organisation brings is really important. And one of the things I noticed early from FIFA's social accounts was how humanist and how personal and warm and just in touch with what was going on, even if it was slightly outside of the domain of the event. It wasn't corporate at all. So that meant that they had conversations before the event, because it's a pop-up event, if you like. It wasn't like they could refine their voice over time. No, they decided clearly this is who we are going to be online. And so I put this post up here that, I think 4 years ago we wouldn't have seen the last line on this, where it's talking about on this day England did something in the 60s, and it says, like, the bottom says 4 days later, football came home, and they gave it a wink, to just put a little bit of humor into it, to show some personality. And that's what being a community manager and a humanist lifestyle brand is all about as well. Number 6 is media company. The thing with social media is that it amplifies all goals. So if you look at the organization at the enterprise level and all of the things it is looking to achieve, you could ask yourself, what contribution could social media make to this, or what contribution does it make to this? And often, in less than half of the cases, social media objectives are linked to marketing objectives. They're not linked to the enterprise objectives, but that's really missing out on the power of social and digital media. And it's really a strategic long play in being a media company as well, where you put out engaging content, and that engaging content grows followership. And with that growing followership and more numbers, you've got more leverage to go to your partners or new partners and sell digital assets, and also co-create with those partners as well, because we're seeing some real innovation in content coming from partners as well. So it really is a cycle as well, and it's really why I'm an advocate for social media, getting a lot more profile and prominence in the organization at the top level. And as I said before, the best teams are now lifestyle brands. Was something that FC Bayern Munich did really well. Was a cat invaded the pitch last year. So what they did was that they ended up taking all of these cat selfies, with the team in the background on the pitch and so on. It was really humorous stuff. And they did that because they know that the people who follow them online aren't just following them for the football, but they're following them because they love everything that surrounds the team. It's a smart thing to do. So I put this infographic together with Sports Business International as well. So it's another one that you can find on their website, but basically it's saying that under their media or content profile, FIFA set out to do things under 4 different pillars to inform people. And they had a really structured process for doing that, to connect with people, as I mentioned, that community management responsibility, to entertain. They really tapped into the gaming popularity to come up with a lot of different competitions and fantasy games, and also for support, because a lot of people were going to be at the game, or if they're not going to be at the games, to be able to take them inside of those, the events, the stadia, the country, and so on. So they were really defined in the pillars of content that they wanted to produce. And this is a really good model to look at for your own purposes as well. Digital retailer is an interesting one to me, because for me, we think of fans that, like, we're always a fan, you know, at any time of the day, but only every now and then we check in with the organization to transact with it, whether it's ticketing, merchandise, tours, whatever. So the organization, you know, can put out all of this content and get me feeling good about it, but if it can't really deliver at the time that, 1, I need it to, and 2, in a way that really makes sure that it does, the organization doesn't leave money on the table, then, you know, it's a missed opportunity. And so that means that sports organizations have to keep up with the best practices that are happening out in retail. You know, we know that people are now moving away from bricks and mortar stores. They're shopping online. Amazon has been hugely influential in that area. People now want the Netflix model of subscriptions, and that's also impacting on ticketing now, where they're really becoming unbundled. People don't want to commit to a whole year, for example. Orlando Magic did something really innovative, which is, if you don't want to go to a particular match, you can actually sell that match tickets back to the organization, and they'll resell them to other people. And then the other thing that is happening as well is that, like, the whole Uber thing of we want what we want, where we want, when we want. And Google now is starting to see how people's shopping preferences are really changing, and it's really becoming me-centric. So I want a pair of shoes that's closest to me is the sort of things that are happening. So we need to consider, like, when we're talking about match day experience and so on, okay, what are the things that you need to be able to address to make sure you can get the most out of your digital retailing opportunities in those short spaces of time. And all of this requires significant investment, whether it's Wi-Fi and technology, whether it's the e-commerce store, and these kind of stores can be global now as well, which means they need to have a big supply chain behind them and so on. So a couple of the notable things from FIFA's website were the 2 different areas. The e-commerce area and also the ticketing area were really easy to navigate. You can see in the kind of the middle of the page, we've got the team flags going across. That is for easy access. So I can straight away get into my part of the e-commerce site, and that helps me to refine my search and get me interested really quickly, rather than having to move all around the place looking for things. So it was really thinking about individuals rather than the organization, how they wanted to lay it out. And with the ticketing area, it was like a one-stop area, not just for the tickets, but for all of the different information that went along with that. And it really makes the organization and the experience all that more easy when people are provided with all of the information as well. Open innovation. The sport now can't just rely on coming up with ideas from within its own team, or even from looking at what the industry does. We need to look broader than that into the whole of the economy, and see a lot of the innovations now, if we take venues, for example, are coming from other industries. We see in the financial technology area, paperless, cashless ticketing is coming in to stadium. Digital marketing is taking its cues, and FIFA for sure took their cues from outside, where visual content, video content, and gaming are very much in vogue. And so that's the sort of content that we should be putting out as examples. And then organizations are using their own brand power to be a platform for innovations that they can then shape into their own organization and create competitive advantage that way. So we see many organizations now running hackathons or accelerators or incubators, trying to find startups in the different areas that we want, whether it's fan engagement, whether it's pitch performance, to then nurture and get the benefits there. You know, once again, taking those ideas from outside of the organization. And then partnerships with technology companies are also for the purpose of mutual innovation. It was interesting, back in 2015, Real Madrid partnered with Microsoft, and at the time, Real Madrid said that they declared that they're a fan company, while the president of the CEO of Microsoft said that sport is the most disrupted of all industries. So both of those organizations were coming together to create some real lasting technological innovation for that organization, and we can see the results that Real Madrid are having as well. Coming back to FIFA and that FIFA 2.0 document I shared with you earlier, one of the pillars that is on that strategy map is innovation, and that's what FIFA say about innovation in their document, that they'll leverage the technology advances to improve the quality of the football experience, whether it's on the field, outside, and so on. So innovation has to be a core pillar, and some organizations even put it as a core value of the organization. And then some of the stated digital innovations that FIFA come up with were their new app, innovative interactive coverage on social media, using visual stories, once again tapping into that content that resonates with people, where it's all based on thumb-sized images that we can click and take us to either videos or images, and then increased responsiveness through customer service function. So all innovations that they've taken from outside of the industry back into the event. Ecosystem manager is the ninth of the digital responsibilities. And so what I've put that one there to be is that if we can work out how to connect as the organization more than one of the entities that are in our whole ecosystem, will gain greater value. So for example, some organizations with their corporate partnership program put those partners together and see if they can co-create. So rather than me as the organization just dealing on one-to-one with each of those companies, they now have networking days for each of them, and collectively they can all unlock new ideas. Another one is crowdsourcing content from the fans. Just ask them what they'll want. You know, they'll tell you, and there'll be ideas that you won't necessarily expect. And then co-creating campaigns with partners, and there's several examples in the world now where the partners are getting players from the team together with the organization and really sculpting some innovative new content. And none of this happens by accident. You need to work out, okay, what are all of our different moving parts, and which ones can we put together for greater value? It's that old, 1 + 1 equals, more than its sum. So this is, the app. If you went into the app and looked at all of the different things that are in there, and then think, what is the back of house, or what is it? What does that operating system bring together? You would be pretty impressed by all the different stakeholders who would have been involved in contributing to that, and probably contributing to that in real time as well throughout the organization. And this is a quote from Alex Stone, who's the group leader of the social media and video area, which is worth reading out, because he says, this is at FIFA in Russia. In the office, we have our social media team, community management coordinator, graphic designers, business intelligence analysts, digital marketing team, statisticians, production team from FIFA.com, the app people, the editorial people, all for the purpose of generating the social and digital content. So they're bringing all of that collaboration I spoke about earlier, but also the team works in tandem with the 32 reporters they have out assigned to each of the teams, and the partnership team at Getty Images and FIFA TV. So all of these people, they mapped, okay, this is our ecosystem that we need to get functioning together to put all of the content out there, because it's not just about publishing the content, it's about where all the video is going to be accessible from, where all the photos are going to be stored, tagged, accessible from, and so on. So it's a real engine going behind this, and with that purposeful ecosystem management, that's how you unlock that value. And there's one thing I just have to show you from earlier in this week, which is a classic case of getting ecosystem management right. It could have been, so LA Galaxy wanted to thank members for joining up. So they could have just done it the old way of the organization thanking the individuals. But what they did was they mapped a star, Ibrahimovic, with the fans and the organization to create not just that interaction, which I'm sure blew the mind of the fans he called up, but all of the promotional activity that they were able to do around that, which resonated around the world. So you could compare that than if they just turned up to work and they jumped on the phones and the people from corporate just started calling the people. So that's a great example of ecosystem management in play. And the final of the 10 digital responsibilities that I've come up with, and you're welcome to suggest if you think there's others, is that we're a software company now. As the former CEO of General Electric said, one day you wake up and you're a software company. And what that means is that for sports business is that we need to think of the fan and the journey that fan takes, and all of the different points of interaction they have, or that they could have, all of the points of interaction they could have, the financial ones, then design for those different moments. And all of that means that we need a layer of software between ourselves and the fans. And so, once again, we consider the FIFA World Cup, and this screenshot is of the area where you could go into and look at the competitive side of things. So you've got a match predictor, the dream team, the fantasy app, the bracket challenge, and so on. So this is just one part of the website, but behind this is a sophisticated competition that's sponsored by each one has its own sponsor, and different rules and different databases and different ways that those competitions are promoted, awarded, and so on. And that's just one sliver of the website. You could go into the website and then look at the e-commerce area, or the ticketing area, or the news area, and so on, and just see how much complexity lies behind what seemingly is so simple on the surface. And so when Infantino talks about the digital revolution taking place, it is obvious to me that they've looked at the fan journey, and the fan could be two things. It could be someone new coming to Russia, and so what are all of the things that fan journey looks like? Or it could be someone, the other 99% of us who weren't there, and what's the experience that we're looking to have? And then they map all of that out, and then they put that software down, and then we got the experience that we were able to enjoy at World Cup 2018. So Diego, that's me talking quite a bit about about what I consider to be the 10 digital age responsibilities for an organization. Now, they're not necessarily things that you would find in specific job descriptions or titles, but they're those things that I think should be embedded in an organization's DNA.
Thank you, Stephen. I mean, it's such a wealth of knowledge to go through the material that you've just shared with us, because it does give us a very precise overview, snapshot of the areas that are really having an impact in the business side of sport, and to link it to this case study that you've prepared, looking at how FIFA demonstrated these traits throughout the World Cup really highlights, and I think we can take a lot away from what you've presented today. And just by looking at some of the engagement that we're getting on social media and Twitter, I think most of our audience tonight really feels as though this provides valuable insight into, you know, the digital transformation that we've been talking about throughout. And that leads us to, you know, segue into the program that Stephen has put together in partnership with SBI. And it's a course, an online certificate program, precisely called Managing Digital Transformation in Sport. And it's aimed at those professionals that are looking to manage, they're looking to lead change within an organization. And you know, if you had an opportunity to listen to the webinar tonight with Stephen, you will have seen just a sample of the type of content that is part of that program. And if you are looking to further develop and gain the digital literacy required to, as we said before, to manage, to lead change in the digital era that we live in sports organizations, well, this course has been designed specifically for that. So some of the topics covered, of course, and Stephen has gone through some of these with the digital responsibilities tonight, are obviously monetization of digital assets for a sports organization. So that's something that we cover in the content. There's also a strategic overview for deployment of new technology within sports property. So again, and this is something that we've seen today in the digital responsibilities and how FIFA have implemented this. So a lot of what you've seen tonight is, like I said, a small sample of the type of content, the type of case studies that are updated, that are very much relevant to what's happening in the industry today. We also look at fan engagement and new opportunities brought upon by the digital era, which of course, again, we have seen tonight in the 10 digital responsibilities that we've covered. We also forecast and evaluate new digital trends in the business of sports and the sports ecosystem. This is something interesting to touch upon because it's something that evolves very quickly, and what is relevant today in 3, 4, 6 months time sometimes changes quite rapidly. And in fact, Stephen is very much on the ball when it comes to these areas. And in fact, in our previous edition of the program, he was sending some updates, even of the content that was being updated within weeks of being launched. So it is something that is very important to remain up to date and relevant. And of course, keeping up with those trends is important. The other opportunity that this course provides is it allows for you to gain a valuable network within the sports industry. So being an online program, you're able to collaborate, you're able to network, you're able to build relationships. And we're going to touch upon this in just a moment. But in the cohort that we had last time, we had people from all over the world, different organizations, and they got together. Many of them met in person, and it's a course that is meant for collaboration. It's meant for networking. It's meant to build those relationships so that you can optimize your opportunities, not just through the content and through the knowledge that you can gain from this, but also the relationships and the friendships that you can build from courses such as these. Now we're connected, and I think Stephen highlighted this in his presentation today. It's a connected world, and education is just another example of how the models are evolving, and people are beginning to build relationships through courses such as this one. So just to go through very quickly the overview of the program on managing digital transformation in sports. It's a course that is delivered online, but it's not just an online course where you have resources in a campus. We actually connect live on a bi-weekly basis where we bring in top speakers from the industry, and Stephen mentioned a few names before, like the Orlando Magic. So we get people from different organizations, different sports entities, and who are leaders in their field to come and share their knowledge, to collaborate, and gives you the opportunity to learn from the top experts, and also network with them and understand what are their challenges, what are their realities, what are their opportunities moving forward in this digital ecosystem that we're in. The language, of course, is 100% in English, so it's an international program that people sign on from everywhere in the world. The duration is 4 months. It begins in September, and it runs through all the way through December before the Christmas break. The starting date is September 10th, so there's still about a month left for people to inquire about the program and sign on. We are getting quite a bit of demand for this cohort again. And like I said, it's aimed at those professionals that want to gain digital literacy to contribute to business transformation within a sports, a football organization. And that doesn't mean that you have to be working in the sports or the football industry to take this program. Quite the contrary. It also provides you the tools, the knowledge to be able to gain that literacy so that you're able to either transition or evolve into a position in the sports industry. So we've had, in the previous edition of the program, we've had people who already work in the sports or the football industry, but we also had other executives that wanted to gain that knowledge to be able to transfer their skills from the corporate world into the business side of the sport or particularly the football industry. Stephen, as you have seen, is a very knowledgeable expert in these areas, and one of the great things that we received as feedback from the previous edition of this course is that everybody felt very much a support, and that's precisely what we want to do. This is not a transactionary type of course where you do the course and you finish it. It's a community that we're building. It's a collaboration initiative that we're creating here, and the people that come through our program, they stay part of the SBI community, and they remain in contact with Stephen. They remain in contact with the people that participate as guest lecturers. So if you're interested, the requirement that we ask is that you have a bachelor's degree in any discipline or the equivalent of that. So let us know, and feel free to apply if this is something that you'd be interested in. Now I'll turn it back over to Stephen because the course is divided into 4 terms. And each term is quite specific into what we discussed. So I'll turn it back to you, Stephen, if you want to just maybe touch upon each individual module.
Yeah, as you were talking, Diego, I reflected on one point as well, that in digital transformation, there's a concept where it's actually not until the very last parts of digital maturity does the formal organization get involved. And by that, I mean formal leadership says, okay, now we're going to work on something purposeful. There's a couple of models around that are like a 6-stage model. And it's not until the 5th stage that leadership says, okay, we're going to launch into a purposeful transformation like FIFA did. So what that means is before that, there's digital initiatives taking place, and they're taking place by people who put it on themselves to say, we need to build an organization that is more in line with our customers, with the external environment, with what are the competitors now. And so what those people do is then they go and they find other like-minded people in the organization, and those people get together. Hopefully they're from a different department, so you can build out a business case, get some funding for something, and there creates some momentum, and then different committees may get formed, and some policy and guidelines and different things may evolve. But what the point of this is that all of us typically will are interested in learning. So we're people who want to make a difference in our world. We probably are those kind of people who are the agents of change in our organization, and it's just that perhaps if we had some more knowledge, we could even be more influential. And I think that, yes, this course can be for leadership and management, because they can take it and really run with it. But it's also, and I think we found this in the last course, it's for anyone who from across the organization. We have people from the legal area, people from digital, people from social, people from corporate. It didn't matter, that they were all in it together to be those agents of change. And I think that's where the really productive conversations and collaboration happened as well. So turning quickly to the 4 different modules, and I won't speak too long to these. We spent some time looking at what we've just done now, which is really outlining the business case and looking at the external environment, but also the sports industry. Look at numerous case studies from outside and inside to really build that business case of why transform. We look at all of the digital technologies that are impacting the digital economy, Internet of Things, cloud computing, virtual reality, augmented reality. The one that I would add to this now, I'm just starting to get exposed to a little bit of information on blockchain, and I think that rather than it being a purely financial thing, the concept of smart contracts is really going to unlock some new opportunities for deeper fan engagement. So, I'm looking forward to, investing a little bit more time on that part. Then what we're going to do is, with that context set, we're going to move into, as an organisation, what are the success factors for an organisation to become digitally mature, and also on the other side, what are the risks and pitfalls that any organisation has to look out for. And what we do is we take some best practice from outside, but also from different teams, leagues, clubs, federations, associations all around the world to demonstrate how these best practices are being implemented as well. In the third one, as I mentioned in the formal presentation part, I'm really an advocate for unlocking the power of social into the business to create what's called a social business, where all of the objectives are turbocharged with social objectives and content and the like. So we look at all of that. We look at particularly the revenue side of things. We look at how the digital age sponsorship model is different. We look at social media platform selection, what you should do, before moving into a new platform and the value that would bring. Do a special feature on esports, look at digital marketing models, which is another interesting topic that I like. Mobile apps are now, as I said before, really powerful platform, and we'll have the CEO of one of the leading app developers come and give a great presentation as well. And then data underpins everything, and so what we'll do is we'll look at all of the uses and applications of data in the marketing and customer engagement areas, and then that pretty much rounds it out, I think. Diego.
Yeah, so those are the four modules as Stephen mentioned. Now, the profile of the participants, in the previous edition, these are some of the organizations that, their executives, their employees took part in this program. So, it's attracted the attention of some of the major clubs, federations, leagues, and sports entities and organizations, because precisely what, Stephen has pointed out, this is something that is happening today that is very relevant. So this goes back to the point about creating a network, creating a collaboration environment where you're able to, interact and engage with a lot of the participants that, come from some of these organizations. And in many cases, and Stephen will attest to this, we'd like to highlight as well, in one of the previous editions of the sessions that we had a few of the participants, share and highlight some of the projects that they're working and how they're, undertaking digital transformations in their organization. So it's an opportunity, like we were saying, to really create an environment of collaboration and, provides the opportunity to network.
One of the things that, as I said, I've been looking for the last 3 or 4 years at different organizations to profile, and when I went back and reread all the content, these are the brands that we've got up here are some that stood out. So that they became, I made sure that we had a good cross section from different leagues and different markets. So you see Golden State Warriors, Orlando Magic, Dallas Mavericks, for example, are all pioneers in the US sports market, so we can learn a lot from them. Keeping it to football, Barcelona, Real Madrid, Man City, Bayern Munich, AS Roma, as I mentioned before, Seattle Sounders. We have someone come along, a senior vice president of data and analytics from MLS, to tell us how that league is really transforming as well. And then, as I mentioned before, it's important to look outside of our own industry, and some of the stars that I see out there are Nike, Gatorade, Disney, even Caesars Entertainment, feature quite prominently in our case studies as well.
Now, we're going to run through this quite quickly so that we get to your questions. But essentially, the methodology works in this. In this, if you look at this graph here, so you have an online campus where you have all the resources, which include presentations, case studies, videos, articles, documents, etc. And then we activate that with a live class. And the live classes are composed of guest speakers that we bring from top organizations, executives that are experts in their domain, and they come and they share their knowledge, they share their point of view in the different areas of the course. So you're able to interact and engage with them. And then finally, after the sessions, which are both with the executives and some lab sessions to have some more discussion, then we have a final project, which is then assessed. And of course, it's part of the collaborative element of the program, where you're working with other course participants and you're creating an assignment that is relevant to the material of the program. As we mentioned before, the program runs from September to December. So there's still about a month left. If you're interested in applying, there's still availability, and it starts in September. It runs through December. It's 4 months. Each week there's new content unlocked. So new modules are unlocked for your revision, and you're able to, take part in this. This is another thing that is important to highlight. This program has been designed to be done in parallel with other professional or academic commitments. So it's not something that you're going to be required to be, full-time, dedicating 30, 40 hours per week. Rather, with a couple of hours per week, you're going to be able to digest the content, and then you're going to have the live session where you're going to be able to interact and learn from the top executives. So it's really something that you can do in parallel with other commitments throughout the duration of the program. As we said, it's aimed at professionals that are looking to improve their digital literacy, to contribute to digital transformation of a sports organization. It starts on September 10th. Duration is 4 months. The tuition fee is 2,950 euros. This is also able to be broken down in installments. So if you're interested in the program and you want to know more about this, get in touch with our team. You see there, our website, our Twitter. You can also email us, which we'll put the contact in just a minute. That's either info@sbibarcelona.com or contact@sbibarcelona.com, which in just a moment you'll see the slide with those emails. But get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to know if this is something that you'd be able to apply, to use, to benefit from the content, from the network, and from the collaborative approach that this course provides. So that's in essence what the program is all about. Just to finish off, these are some testimonials from people that have done the program. We have Matteo Trevisani, who works as a digital specialist, web and digital specialist at CONCACAF. So there's what he had to share. Feel free to follow us on Instagram, on Twitter, where we post some of these testimonials as well, so that you find out what some of the students that did this program before and some of the participants, what they got out of, what their learning experience was like. So I won't read the quote, but feel free to go to our social media platforms to see a little bit more about that. We also had Costas, who works as a legal advisor for the Qatar Football Federation, which goes back to what Stephen was saying. I mean, the profile of participants for this type of program is not meant for just any specific area. We had Matteo just recently, which we saw the quote. He's in content management, digital media, but then we have someone like Costas who's in the legal team. So it just goes to show that digital transformation transcends the different areas within an organization, and it's part of what we learned when we had the different members of the cohort from different fields and different areas of their sports organization. So again, feel free to follow us on social media if you want to know more about that. I'll turn it over to Stephen, because this is a quote that perhaps you can summarize how you know, this all brings it all together, and then we can maybe turn it over for some questions from our participants.
The main thing with digital transformation is that it's about people. We're doing it for people, but it's also like those people being fans. But on the inside of the organization, the biggest impediment to becoming a digitally proficient organization are people things, whether it's cultural and resistance to change, whether it's the skills of the people at leadership, management, staffing levels, whether it's the people having the training on the tools and gaining their buy-in. Those are the three main topics that prevent an organization, despite its best intentions, from actually going and delivering, because strategy is easy, execution is hard, and execution comes down to the people side of it. And so that's what this, like, I was very mindful when putting the content together. Is this the sort of content that is going to help someone become more digitally literate? And that's where we've arrived at now.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that said, you know, that concludes the webinar for tonight. So now it's over, you know, an opportunity for you guys to ask any questions, whether it's about the 10 digital responsibilities or more concretely about the course. You know, feel free to type them in the chat box, and we'll be monitoring some of the questions that are coming through now. And if you have any questions, any comments that you'd like to share with us about the presentation tonight, you know, feel free to type them in the chat box. You know, we can understand that there's a lot of content there that you guys were probably taking notes and looking at the different responsibilities. So let me just monitor and see. But in the meantime, while we wait for questions, you know, as we always like to say, time is a valuable commodity. So we thank you for having joined us for this webinar. We hope we've delivered value, and we'd be more than happy to you know, engage with you and tell you more about the program that we're running in September on managing digital transformation in sport. And of course, if you have any specific questions about anything that we talked about. So I see Clive has a question, says, I was delayed in joining. Can I get a copy of the deck after the presentation? So Clive, there will be a webinar recording made available where you will have the deck available through the recording. So we will be sending that across to everybody that registered for this webinar. So thanks for your interest in that, and we will make sure you receive that. If you're already part of our newsletter, you will get that automatically. But you know, if not, just make sure to let us know and send us a message, and we'll make sure that you receive that. But yeah, we encourage you to jump on our newsletter, because this is the type of stuff that we constantly share with our community, and that's something to consider. So thank you for that, Clive, and we'll be making sure you get that information shortly after we finish tonight. We have a question from Alex, and he says, hello from Mexico. How emerging sport properties can take advantage from these 10 digital responsibilities based on budget and the new market that they're aiming to penetrate? Great question. So, Stephen.
This is always a question, and it was great. You know, in our last course, we had some of the biggest teams, global brands in the world, and then we had people from emerging economies. So it's a point that I always really like to reflect on. You know, there's a couple of points that I would bring up. One, you don't have to be first in the digital economy, because mistakes get made, and, you know, the pioneers are doing just that. They're moving forward, you know, to work out what the best practices are, you know. So if we take a new technology, for example, virtual reality, you know, the leaders are testing and learning before we, who are sitting on the sidelines, can see, okay, so it doesn't work so well for this sort of thing, because actually it really narrows the view, and people, you know, are more wanting to share rather than to lock themselves in. Okay, so you know, there's real learnings from watching what others do, so we can learn there. But the other more important aspect of it is that we're now in the era of economies of unscale. That means that we're not in the manufacturing era anymore, or those manufacturing philosophies where bigger is always better, and we need to build up so much before we're able to take advantage. You know, that the app, for example, like once it's built, it's actually a zero cost for every person who joins that app, it doesn't really cost anything more. And that's a fundamental new economic principle that wasn't there before. It's the same with Wi-Fi in Stadia. It doesn't necessarily cost more when more people are using it. But beyond that, in a practical way, and we had our speaker come along and talk about mobile apps, they can be really accessible. If you reach the right vendor, you know, that they've got because it's now things are available on cloud computing particularly, and you can get software as a service. So you can say to the app vendor, okay, I want my app to do this 1, 2, 3. You select the things from a menu. They tailor it according to your budgets and so on. And so, you know, they're just a couple of simple examples about, you know, what I now term the economy of unscale. But it all starts with knowing what your purpose is. And so that means that you then make sure that your decision making and your investments are directly in line with where the organization wants to go. And that's why I like to reference AS Roma, because they want to be the most fan connected team in the world. So they make sure that all of their investments sum up towards that goal. And so that's the first point. And then look around and, you know, talk to technology vendors. You know, you'll be surprised at what products the good ones have available, and that, you know, are really able to support what your requirements are. And then of course it comes down to, you know, really being sure about what your priorities are. There's never any shortage of ideas in an organization, but you really need to have a refined process for making sure you decide on what the key priorities are, and, you know, really double down on those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Very good point. Very good point. We have another question come through Instagram, direct message from Robert RVS, and he says, in an online course, how can we network and collaborate with some of our classmates and speakers? So that's a really good question, actually, because, you know, one of the great things of connecting in an online program such as this is that you get an opportunity to interact with people from all over the world. As we mentioned before, in our previous intake, we had people from the US, we had people from Latin America, from Europe, from the Middle East, and everybody was connecting. And in fact, you know, many times, you know, because we create WhatsApp groups and other ways to collaborate and engage with each other, and many times we would receive messages, and you know, a couple of the participants would send us photographs, and they'd say, hey, you know, I'm in Dubai and I met with so-and-so and we're working on our project here, and you know, or somebody else would maybe just pass by and, you know, in Madrid visiting one of the participants who we had working for the club. So it is an opportunity to really create a worldwide network and build those relationships. And likewise with the speakers that we bring in. I mean, the speakers are very high-level professionals, but they're all very open, and you know, many of them are very much you know, very keen to answer the questions of the participants, and you know, get involved in some of the questions and the projects that they have in mind moving forward. So definitely, it is something that you know, it's not like the online courses perhaps that were, you know, 10 years ago. The technology has evolved, and the opportunities for creating those relationships has grown, and I definitely encourage you to think about that, in the sense that you not only gain the perspective of, you know, attending a course where, you know, many times if you're in the city, you just have participants from one particular country, or it's more homogeneous. In this type of environment, you do have an opportunity to interact and engage and network with professionals from different parts of the globe. So thank you for that question, Robert. Stephen, I don't know if you wanted to add anything else on the collaborative aspect of the course and your experience leading it and moderating it.
I think the only thing I would add is that we keep the numbers, you know, to a good mix as well. So, you know, it's big enough to get a diversity of perspectives, but it's small enough for everyone to get to know each other and, you know, start to interact on a personal level as well. And we see that with the WhatsApp group. So it's not just about necessarily connecting with that one person, but you get to know people well enough to say, do you know someone so-and-so in this industry, or do you know so-and-so, from this team or so on? So the whole thing can become a conduit. And I think that sports business is one of the best sharing industries. That we all work in fairly small organizations. We're kind of small to medium organizations, but because we have fans, we have these enterprise level expectations, and so we have a sense, particularly on the back office side, where we're in the business of sport, that we're happy to share and connect and communicate, because everyone learns together. And I think that's one of the great things about sport, and one of the things that I particularly try and create as a learning culture. And as Diego said before, when I select speakers from the network that I have, I select those people who are really personable people as well, so that they can be only too willing to help people with, whether that's a technical issue, whether it's a specific topic, whether it's a contact, and so on. So that's how we like to set it up.
Absolutely. Well, with that, I think there's one last point here from Enos. He says, awesome, great presentation. Thank you, Enos. Yes, you will receive the recording, not the PDF, but you will receive the recording via a link that you will be able to watch the presentation again, and you can, obviously forward it and rewind it according to where you want to go in the slides. So that'll be made available. Again, if you're on our newsletter, you will receive that automatically. So we encourage you to go to our website and sign on to the newsletter if you want to receive this automatically. Otherwise, just get in touch with us via email, as you see here on screen, or on social media. We're on Twitter at SBI_Barcelona. Likewise on Instagram, same handle. You can contact Stephen at SB1Sport if you want to, comment anything that he's discussed about the 10 digital responsibilities tonight. And of course, any, other questions, whether it's from the content side, the administrative side of things, about the course or this webinar, feel free to get in touch, and we'd be delighted to answer any of your questions and queries. That said, I take this opportunity to thank everybody tonight for joining us and spending this evening with Stephen and myself during this webinar. Thank you for connecting from all over the world and for remaining online throughout this webinar. I'd also like to personally thank Stephen and acknowledge him for the great work and the fantastic resources that he's pulled together, and leading this program on managing digital transformation in sports. And of course, we've learned a great deal from your insight and your examples tonight. So thank you, Stephen, as always, for dedicating your valuable time to our audience and to the community of SBI.
Well, thank you. For me, it's fun. So, I just hope that I was able to provide, people who attended here with some value. And as Diego said, you can connect with me on Twitter or on LinkedIn as well. Happy to take all invitations. Excellent.
Well, that said, thanks everybody once again. Stay tuned for the latest news about this program and other initiatives at SBI. We will have another webinar coming up soon, very shortly, so we'll be announcing that. And throughout the summer, make sure you follow what we have, as we will continue to deliver valuable content on these hot and relevant topics of sports business. So take care, everybody. Have a great evening, and hope to hear from you soon. So have a nice evening or afternoon or night, wherever you're connecting from. Bye for now.